Chapter 640. The discussion among the women about the best outfit of the night was getting more and more intense. They were praising Hill and Camilla on the surface, and at the same time, giving themselves extra points. Even if they couldn't become the best of the night, it was still something to be happy about if they could become the best in their own circle. Women's happiness was actually very simple. Meanwhile, Cyril, who had just been reprimanded by Michael, had already returned to his seat. He cast a cold glance at Meg's departing figure with a hint of wariness in his eyes. If she only had 2 10th-tier magic casters as her masters, then he would be fine as long as he didn't do anything to her. However, the City Lord had an ambiguous relationship with them, so he was rather wary of her. In Chaos City, the City Lord's castle and the Grey Temple were inseparable. Even the President had to abide by the rules of Chaos City. After withdrawing his gaze from Meg, Cyril began to search for a target in the crowd. He had heard that Gloria would also be attending the banquet tonight, but he didn't hear her name being announced, nor could he find her in the banquet hall. She hasn't appeared in public for so many years, she must be scared. A disdainful smile appeared on Cyril's face as he said, "How are you going to compete with me like this? Even your father couldn't beat me, how can you be better than him? You're just a little kid. Didn't you say that bitch Gloria would also be coming? Why don't I see her?" Hanai whispered to Heidi. "Does she even deserve to attend a banquet like this? Is she going to come in that hideous cloak of hers, or is she going to cover her face?" Heidi sneered. "Ha ha ha, perhaps she's already hiding in a corner and eating." Hanai also burst into laughter. "Father, didn't Big Sister say that she would also be coming tonight?" Mickey looked around in the crowd for a long while before turning to Lance, who was holding a glass of wine, and asking in a quiet voice. "Yes, Gloria said that she would be coming. Did something happen?" Deborah asked with a concerned expression. "It's okay. Maybe something happened in the shop. Maybe they'll be here soon." Lance put down his glass and comforted her. He also looked a little worried. Jeffrey and Michael had just sat down in the VIP seats when a middle-aged man in black trotted over and whispered in Jeffrey's ear, "President, late?" Jeffrey raised his head and glanced at the entrance. After a moment of silence, he nodded expressionlessly. "Yes." The man nodded and left quickly. After a while, he appeared at the exit and whispered a few words in the master's ear. The MC's expression relaxed a lot. He stood up straight again, holding the invitation in both hands, and announced loudly, "Gloria Morton of Suede Clothing Store has arrived." Why are there still people here? According to convention, shouldn't the City Lord and the President be the last to appear? And who is this Gloria Morton? Suede Clothing Store? How come I've never heard of such a shop? Is it famous? This shop might not be famous, but Miss Gloria is the President's granddaughter. Not long ago, she became one of the candidates for Family Morton's successor. The President arranged for her to appear last. Could there be a deeper meaning behind it? As soon as the MC's words came out, the banquet hall suddenly became restless. Everyone looked at the entrance. They all wanted to know who this late daughter of Family Morton was. She dared to enter after the President and the City Lord. "She's here." Cyril was slightly taken aback upon hearing this, and he turned toward the VIP seats before chuckling. "She's late? She might as well not have come at all. She's not the only one who's embarrassing herself. It looks like Mars has also been corrupted by her. Is it Sister Gloria?" Amy's eyes lit up and looked at the entrance. Meg also looked up with anticipation. It was a bold choice to wait for such a long time, but he liked it. "Is it that beautiful girl?" Vivian raised her eyebrows and looked at the entrance. "I didn't think that bitch would actually dare to come. But she still dares to be late at such an event. Let's see how Grandpa will punish her when she gets back." Hanai and Heidi were gloating. "Will Gloria be my future opponent?" Hill looked at the entrance with a playful expression. At this moment, a figure in a blue dress appeared on the highest step of the entrance. The light seemed to dim a little. It was a beautiful girl with light blonde hair that was tied up in a bun. What was even more eye-catching was the blue dress that was as exquisite as a work of art. The narrow waist showed off her slender waist, and the pleated dress dragged on the ground like a cloud. The bold backless design perfectly showed off her slender shoulders and delicate back. A thin platinum necklace hung around her swan-like neck, and a blue teardrop fell between her two sexy collarbones. Sexy, pure. These were two words that stood at two extremes, but at this moment, they were perfectly presented on her body. It was as if she were glowing, and no one could look away from her. The entire venue fell silent. All of the men and women stared at the girl with wide eyes, and they could hardly believe their eyes. Wow. She's so beautiful. Amy's mouth gaped open in admiration. Indeed, she's so beautiful, Vivian chimed in, unable to take her eyes off of her. Who is this girl? I feel like I've found the best prey I've seen in decades. Camilla's eyes gradually lit up. She's so beautiful. How could there be such a beautiful person in this world? How could there be such a beautiful dress? That dress is so beautiful. It's so classy. Moreover, it exudes a unique style everywhere. Showing your back is simply too awesome. I feel like she's the best of the best. I wonder where young Mistress Gloria got her dress from. I also want to have one custom made for me. All of the women present were in an uproar. They stared at Gloria's dress with glowing eyes, and they wanted nothing more than to rush up and take it for themselves. How? How is this possible? That bitch. How could she have such a beautiful dress? Heidi stared at Gloria in disbelief. It's definitely not her own. Also, how could she wear such a revealing dress? She's so shameless. Grandpa is going to punish her when we get back. Hanai also wore an expression of disbelief, as if she had been dealt a heavy blow. Mag, who was standing at the side, glanced at Hertie and Hanai, and leisurely said, "Honor depends on one's heart, not one's clothes." Chapter 641. Gloria stood at the top of the stairs and looked down at the raucous cheers of the crowd. She was a little excited, but also a little nervous. Then, her gaze found Mag in the crowd. She was like a boat drifting in the wind and rain that had suddenly found a lighthouse in the dark, and her nervous heart was immediately soothed. A relaxed smile appeared on her face, and she raised her chin slightly as she walked down the stairs in a graceful and calm manner. "Th. Impossible." Cyril looked on with an incredulous expression as Gloria made her way down the stairs. In his memory, she was a little girl who always wore a hood over her head and sat in a corner without saying a word. When had she become such a confident woman? On top of that, the calmness that Kieran displayed at such a moment made Kieran feel like he saw another Hill. He had initially treated her as a joke, but she had suddenly become the person who could control his fate. This sudden sense of urgency made it difficult for him to accept. If this dress is from her own clothing store, then she must be an interesting opponent. Even I can't help but want to have a custom-made red one. A faint smile appeared on Hill's face as he looked at Gloria, but it was as if he was staring at his prey and his opponent. "It's Big Sister," Mickey yelled with excitement as he raised his hand and waved at Gloria. "It really is her. She's our daughter." An elated expression also appeared on Deborah's face, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes at the sight of Gloria's smile. She covered her mouth, and it was unclear whether she was laughing or crying. "All right, the children are all laughing. Why are you crying?" Lance gently wrapped an arm around her shoulder and pulled her into his embrace with a smile, but for some reason, his eyes were also slightly red. A rare smile appeared on Jeffrey's face, but it quickly faded. "President, is this Professor Lance's daughter?" Michael asked with a smile as he looked at Jeffrey. "Yes, she is." Jeffrey nodded in response. "She's much prettier than Professor Lance. She looks like his wife. Perhaps she'll be the next Hill." Michael chuckled. "Compared to that little girl from the Buffett family, she's still a far cry." Jeffrey shook his head. Michael looked at Jeffrey and said with a smile, "If you ask me, you should learn from that old man Ian. Look at him. He's been fishing and walking his birds every day. He's living such a carefree life. Are you planning to work until you die? As you can see, my son is still useless. If I retire, Morton will fall." Jeffrey shook his head, his expression unchanged. Michael only smiled when he heard that, but he didn't say anything else. Everyone's eyes were fixed on Gloria. The women were eager to know where they could buy such beautiful clothes, while the men were reluctant to look away from such a beautiful woman. Gloria walked into the banquet hall just as the music of the dance began to play. Everyone was curious as to who her dance partner would be. All of the men adjusted their clothes to make themselves appear as gentlemanly as possible before extending invitations to Gloria. However, all of them were rejected by her with a smile, including the son of the deputy city lord and the son of the ambassador from Rodu, Ian. "Mr. Meg, may I have the honor of dancing with you?" Gloria made her way over to Meg with a smile, but her hands were trembling slightly as she held onto the hem of her dress. "Oh, how is that possible? Young Mistress Gloria is inviting that man to dance. My God, who is this man? Could it be that he's a prince of the Roth Empire? This man's luck is so good that it makes me jealous. Is there anything special about this man aside from his good looks?" The crowd was in an uproar. The men were green with envy, while the women began to ponder deeper questions. "I don't know how to dance." Meg scratched his nose with an awkward expression. He knew how to dance in the modern world, but he really didn't know how to dance in this world. Alex didn't have any memories of it, either. The men heaved a sigh of relief upon hearing this. "I can teach you," Gloria said to Meg with a faint blush on her face. "Good luck, father." Amy clenched her little fists as she encouraged him. "I'll keep an eye on Amy." Luna smiled at Meg before nodding at Gloria. She then held onto Amy's hand, and turned away with a hint of disappointment in her heart. "This man is a huge obstacle. Should I get rid of him?" Camilla held the black cat in her arms as she looked at Meg's back with furrowed brows. "Then I'll leave it to you." Meg smiled as he extended his right hand to Gloria. Ballroom dancing was a necessary skill in high society. Since such a beautiful girl was willing to teach him, there was no reason for him to refuse. He liked it when those men were unhappy with him but couldn't do anything to him. Gloria looked at the slender hand and hesitated for a moment. She then reached out her left hand and gently held onto Meg's hand. It was a big, warm hand, like a furnace. The heat from it made her blush even more. She took a step forward and lowered her head slightly as she whispered, "Please put your hand on my back." "Okay." Meg's expression was gentle and calm. He didn't seem to be affected by the cat in his hand. He put his fingers together and gently placed them on Gloria's back. However, he didn't actually touch her back. He was only about an inch away. Gloria looked up at Meg in surprise. She praised Meg's gentlemanly action in her heart, but at the same time, she felt a little lonely. The guests danced on the dance floor under the melodious and soothing music. Gloria guided Mag, and he began to practice the most basic dance steps. He slowly began to follow the beat, and soon, he was able to follow the rhythm of the music, and dance softly and gently. It's quite similar to modern ballroom dancing. There are only a few differences in the basic steps. After learning it, it's not difficult at all. Meg sighed in his heart. From being led by Gloria to flying with Gloria, it only took about 10 minutes. Meg felt the envious and murderous gazes around him as he danced more and more happily. After the song ended, Gloria was panting slightly as she pressed her hand to her chest. She looked at Meg in disbelief and said, "Mr. Meg, have you really never danced before?" The others looked at Meg in disbelief as well. They all believed that Meg was deliberately trying to take advantage of Gloria. "It's my first time dancing. Perhaps, this is my talent." Meg shrugged. Shameless. The same word jumped in everyone's heart at the same time. "You're really a genius." Gloria looked at Meg with admiration. This time, Meg felt a little guilty. "You're Mr. Meg from Amy's, right? I wonder if I can have a cooking duel with you." Chapter 642. Meg turned around, and was greeted by the sight of a middle-aged man in a pure white chef suit. He was of medium build, and had a head of short black hair that was neatly combed. He appeared to be around 40 years of age, and had a gentle appearance. He was also looking at Meg with a smile on his face. "That's head chef Beat from Duca's restaurant, right?" The head chef of Duca's restaurant is challenging Meg to a cooking duel. He's most likely going to turn him down right away. I think the head chef came at the perfect time. He should teach this guy a lesson for putting his hand on young Mistress Gloria's back. Many people began to whisper among themselves upon seeing this, while some of the men were gloating over Beat's misfortune. He's also a chef. Camilla was looking at Meg with a hint of surprise on her face. The black cat poked its head out of her lap, and took a glance at Ugly Duckling and Amy before immediately withdrawing its head back into her lap. Gloria was looking at Meg with a concerned expression. She knew that Meg's cooking skills were the best, but head chef Beat was the most renowned chef in Chaos City, and he was the main reason why Duca's restaurant had always been #1 on the Aiden Square food competition. Hill swirled a tall glass of red wine in his hand as he looked at Meg with a smile on his face. He then glanced at Gloria, speculating about the relationship between the two of them. At the same time, he was also curious as to how Meg was going to respond to Beat's challenge. Is father going to win another big house? Amy's eyes lit up as she looked at Meg with anticipation in her eyes. Are you that confident that Mr. Mac will win? He's the head chef of Duca's restaurant. That owner of Ricky's rotisserie is no match for him, Vivian said with a smile. Then who do you think will win, big sister Vivian? Amy asked as she looked up at Vivian. Vivian considered this seriously before replying in a firm voice, Mr. Mac. You too. Luna shook her head with an amused expression. She was also looking at Meg with concern in her eyes. No one seemed to have thought that Meg would refuse. Are you the head chef in charge of tonight's banquet? Meg looked at Beat and asked. Yes, I'm the head chef of Duca's restaurant, Beat. I'm in charge of tonight's banquet. Beat nodded slightly. I'm sorry, but I'm here as a guest today, so I refuse your challenge. Meg smiled and shrugged. With his character of not getting up early if there were no benefits, he had no interest in participating in this kind of spectator competition. Moreover, if the head chef of Duca's restaurant was not bored enough to challenge him to a duel, it was most likely that someone behind the scenes had instructed him to do so. He did not want to be toyed with by others. He had just bought a high-class suit from the system today. It would be a loss if it got dirty. Ding. The system has issued a new mission. Host, please accept this challenge and defeat your opponent. If you succeed, you will receive a chance to enter the God of Cooking promotion lottery. If you fail, you will receive a fine of 10,000 gold coins. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded. Fuck. System, can you be a little more timely when issuing missions in the future? I just turned him down, and you're issuing me a mission like this? Do you want to embarrass me? Meg didn't think that the system would suddenly pop up again. The system's mission issuance is a completely independent process, so you cannot make any demands on the system's missions, the system replied in a calm voice. You win. Meg rolled his eyes. He turned him down? That's normal. Is there a chef in Chaos City who is better than head chef Beat? Don't underestimate Mr. Mac, his cooking is also very delicious. All of the guests were discussing quietly among themselves. They had thought that they would be able to enjoy a good show, but it appeared that Meg didn't want to engage in a cooking duel with Beat. Looks like tonight's banquet is going to be very interesting, Michael said with a smile in the VIP seats. Head chef Beat was quite concerned about Mr. Meg's attitude toward food, and it looks like he couldn't hold himself back in the end. The owner of Duca's restaurant, Spatch, chuckled. As the vice president of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce, he also had a seat in the VIP seats. This competition is a good thing for both the Aiden Square and the Aiden Chamber of Commerce, Jeffrey said with a calm expression. A hint of surprise appeared on Beat's face as he looked at Meg. He turned toward the VIP seats, upon which Spatch nodded slightly. The smile on his face faded, and a serious expression appeared on his face as he continued, I heard from Mr. Meg that you're here to correct this world's definition of food. I want to know if your so-called correction is really correct. Using my food to define this world's food is what I think is correct. Mag looked at Beat. It appeared that this young and inexperienced head chef had indeed been instructed by someone to do all of this. However, seeing as the mission had already been assigned, and this head chef wasn't going to let him off the hook, then he wasn't going to hold back. What if someone questions your correctness? Beat looked into Meg's eyes with a hint of rage in his eyes. No chef had ever dared to speak to him in such an arrogant manner. I think I'll convince him. Meg smiled. If you're just going to say it, then I won't accept it. Beat shook his head. Ricky used a rotisserie to exchange for a duel with me. What have you prepared for me today, head chef Beat? Meg asked with a smile as he unbuttoned a button on his shirt. Beat's expression stiffened upon hearing this. Even though he was the head chef of Duca's restaurant didn't belong to him, and he didn't own a restaurant like Ricky's rotisserie under his name. If Boss Meg really wants to make a bet, then I'll bet the shop next to Ricky's rotisserie on head chef Beat's behalf. Spatch rose to his feet with a smile, and said, I am the owner of Duca's restaurant, Spatch. All right, then I'll bet Ricky's rotisserie on head chef Beat's behalf. Meg looked at Spatch and nodded slightly before turning to Beat, and asked, how do you plan to conduct this duel, head chef Beat? I've heard that Mr. Meg is extremely proficient in the art of roast beef, and I've recently invented a new dish that uses beef as the main ingredient. Why don't we have a cooking duel using beef as the main ingredient? Mr. Meg, you can use all of the cooking utensils that I've brought with me, including the roasting rack, Beat said as he looked at Meg. Beef? Are you serious? Meg raised an eyebrow upon hearing this. This head chef sure was confident. He knew that Ricky had lost to his roast beef kebabs, yet he still dared to suggest using beef as the main ingredient for the duel. However, roast beef kebabs weren't the only things that he knew how to cook beef. Do you have any objections, Mr. Meg? Beat asked. Chapter 643. Many important figures had attended the Aden Chamber of Commerce's mid-year banquet, and it wasn't a difficult task to select a few important figures who wouldn't make unfair decisions due to personal reasons. As such, Meg nodded with a pleased expression when the judges, City Lord Michael and President Jeffrey, Hill, Camilla, and the Roth Empire's ambassador to Chaos City, K-Rawls, took their seats. Even though this panel of judges was quite amateurish, their extravagance was undeniable. It was very difficult to find a more extravagant panel of judges in Chaos City. 2 portable stoves were placed at the center of the banquet hall, upon which were placed all types of utensils and condiments. Beat, who was wearing a white chef's suit, was already standing in front of the stove on the left. I didn't think that I'd be able to witness a cooking contest at this banquet, and one of the contestants is head chef Beat from Duca's restaurant. I made the right decision to come here tonight. Who would have thought that Meg would actually agree to a cooking contest? If he loses, he'll have to pay the price of an entire gold shop. All of the guests were discussing excitedly among themselves. They were very much looking forward to this cooking contest that could even invite the city lord and president. I think Mr. Mac should cook a spicy grilled fish. Once the delicious spicy grilled fish is brought out, he'll definitely win this contest, Vivian suggested with a serious expression as she crossed her arms in front of her chest. I think all of Mr. Meg's dishes are very delicious, but wouldn't it be better to use the same ingredients for a cooking contest? Luna asked in a quiet voice as she held onto Amy's little hand with a slightly nervous expression. Mr. Meg will definitely win. Gloria was also quite nervous. Even though she was very confident in Meg's cooking, she still couldn't help but feel nervous. Go, father, go. Amy raised her little hand into the air and yelled loudly. She wasn't nervous in the slightest. Beat's cooking is pretty good, but that guy doesn't even look like a chef. Can he really cook good food? Camilla looked at Meg with a skeptical expression. This duel could change the food and beverage industry in the Aden Square. That old fox really doesn't want anything to happen. Hill glanced at the expressionless Jeffrey, then looked at Meg with a solemn expression. However, when he saw the relaxed expression on Meg's face, he quickly relaxed and revealed an enigmatic smile. Cyril chuckled coldly as he looked at Meg, and it was as if he could already foresee the outcome of this match. Insolence. Since you dared to accept Beat's challenge, then I'll make you spit out everything that you've eaten, and destroy your reputation in the Aden Square. Mr. Meg, if you need any more cooking utensils or condiments, please let me know. I'll have them prepare them for you, Beat said as he looked at Meg. There's no need for that. I'm not going to make roast beef kebabs today. I'm going to try out a new dish that I came up with in the past 2 days, and I only need a frying pan. Meg shook his head as he looked at the half-slaughtered cow that was hanging off to the side. This was a high-quality ironhide bull, and judging from its blood, it was quite fresh, so it was perfect for making steak. A new dish. Beat took a meaningful glance at Meg. This young man seemed to be even more arrogant than he had imagined. That's right. I wonder if your new dish or my new dish will suit the judge's tastes, Meg said with a smile. I'll be looking forward to it, Beat replied with a serious expression. All right, let's begin our duel now. Meg's expression was still as relaxed as ever. All right, Beat replied as he gripped onto a thin and long knife on the knife rack. The sharp blade cut through the beef, and a piece of lean beef without the slightest bit of fat was placed on the chopping board. The long blade cut through the beef, almost turning into an invisible white shadow. With a few slashes, the entire piece of beef was cut into cubes of the same size. What incredible knife skills! All of the spectators couldn't help but exclaim in amazement. Meg also nodded in approval. Such knife skills were indeed worthy of Beat's status, but he wasn't in a hurry to begin. After cutting the beef, Beat placed the long knife to the side. Then, he lifted the lid of the heavy, ball-shaped iron wok. The wok was 3 inches thick, and it was almost completely embedded into the stove. Only the lid of the wok was left outside of the wok. Beat placed all of the beef into the black wok before tossing in all of the spices at once. He then picked up a bamboo tube from the side and removed the cover. A faint fragrance of bamboo mixed with the aroma of wine wafted out, causing one's spirit to soar. Is this wine brewed in bamboo? It smells so good. Everyone's eyes lit up as they looked at the bamboo tube in Beat's hand with incredulity. Bamboo wine, I didn't think that this world would have it as well. Meg was also surprised as he looked at the wine barrel in Beat's hand. Beat slowly tipped the bamboo tube in his hand, and the amber wine flowed into the black pot like a faint golden ribbon. The aroma of the wine wafted through the air, and it became more and more concentrated. Good wine, looks like it's time to harvest the bamboo wine again. Michael took a whiff of the wine, and his eyes lit up. Using bamboo wine to stew beef, head chef Beat's ideas are indeed unconventional. It looks like Duca's restaurant is going to have another classic dish, Ambassador Carlos praised. What kind of wine is bamboo wine? However, the aroma of this wine is quite good. Camilla nodded in approval. After pouring half of the bamboo wine into the black pot, Beat closed the bamboo tube. He then took out another wooden barrel and poured half of the clear water into the black pot. After that, he closed the lid of the black pot and twisted it 3 or 4 times to completely tighten the lid. Almost the entire round black pot was under the stove, and only the curved lid of the pot could be clearly seen. Beat pressed a yellow button beside his hand, and the entire stove suddenly began to tremble slightly. Several streaks of fiery red light suddenly rose up around the black pot, and a fiery aura surged toward Beat. It was as if a mysterious power had lifted the ball-shaped black pot into the air, and it began to rotate at a frantic pace. Holy fuck, there's such a thing. Magic stove? Spherical rotating pressure cooker? Meg's eyes widened, and he almost couldn't help but swear. He had thought that his equipment was already sufficiently advanced, but who would have thought that a top-tier head chef had already started to play with magic equipment? This was practically cheating right in front of him. System, give me a bottle of black pepper. He had wanted to observe how Beat was going to stew beef, but he didn't think that Beat would use such advanced technology right off the bat. It wouldn't be good if Beat finished too late. Chapter 644. 10 gold coins for a bottle of black pepper. System, are you trying to take advantage of my misfortune? Meg raised his eyebrows. He suddenly felt that there was a deeper meaning behind the system's mission at this time. Nonsense. Is this the kind of system you speak of? The system was clearly angered by Meg's words. It proudly said, "This black pepper is produced on the Demon Island's western Blue Island. This island only has an area of 1,000 square meters, and less than half of the island is suitable for growing black pepper. The system has selected and cultivated the Cambodian kombu pepper to produce the better quality kombu too. The special climate and environment of the western Blue Island and the rich mineral soil give the black pepper a special flavor. It can play an excellent role in improving the freshness of the dishes. Moreover, black pepper is originally known as black gold. In this world, the price of black pepper is much higher than gold. 10 gold coins for a bottle is already a friendly price. After listening to the system's introduction, Meg was able to accept the price slightly. Good ingredients could afford the high price. In any case, the person paying the bill was a customer. However, he still asked curiously, "Black pepper also exists in this world?" Black pepper is a luxury item in this world. Due to the extremely strict growing conditions and the inconvenient transportation, every wild black pepper can be sold for a high price in the market. Even some high-class restaurants may not be able to receive much black pepper. The system replied, "System, why don't we sell black pepper? This is an extremely profitable business." Meg's eyes lit up. The rarer an item was, the more expensive it would be. Most importantly, the market for black pepper was not small. Host, you must always remember your identity. As a candidate for the god of cookery, don't you feel ashamed selling vegetables every day? The system said with disappointment. Then you, a gourmet system, should be proud of selling black pepper every day? Meg rolled his eyes. He glanced at Beat, who was quickly preparing other side dishes. He could not be bothered to continue arguing with the system. He directly said, "All right, I want a bottle of black pepper. When you teleport it over, be discreet and send it directly into my pocket." Ding. 10 gold coins have been deducted. 1 bottle of black pepper has been delivered. Meg lowered his head and looked at his suddenly bulging crotch. A strange expression appeared on his face as he roared in his mind, "System, I said it's my pocket, not the crotch. You pervert." "Sorry, the teleportation location is slightly off," the system said apologetically. Meg only felt a chill at his crotch, and then the pocket beside him bulged. Only then did his expression become more natural. Fortunately, no one noticed this change, or else he would probably be labeled as a pervert. Reaching into his pocket, Meg took out a small bottle of black pepper and placed it on the table. After checking the ingredients and condiments he needed, he took off his well-ironed black suit and handed it to the waiter beside him. He then unbuttoned his sleeves and rolled them up twice before reaching for a flat kitchen knife on the knife rack. This fellow is so flashy. Head chef Beat is almost done, but he still hasn't started. Yeah, I don't think he's a chef. Can he really make delicious food? The guests looked at Meg and whispered among themselves. Most of them were not optimistic about him. This fellow must be scared. A cold smile appeared on Cyril's face as he looked at Mag. This duel was completely unexpected to him, but he was still very willing to see this detestable man pay the price of an entire restaurant to him. Looks like it's time to show off my real skills. A mocking smile appeared on Mag's face as he listened to all of the chatter going on around him. He strode over to that half of the cow, and sliced the cow's back a few times with his kitchen knife. He then pointed his knife toward the cutting table, and 6 pieces of beef tenderloin of the exact same size and thickness fell onto the cutting table in a straight line. They were arranged in 2 rows on the table, and even their shapes were completely identical. Wow, what amazing knife skills. I didn't even see what he did clearly. Are those beef tenderloins? The size and shape are actually exactly the same. The eyes of the guests immediately lit up. This godly knife skills had completely overturned their impression of Meg. Your knife skills are pretty good. It looks like your foundation is pretty good. Beat also raised his eyes to look at Meg and nodded his head slightly. Meg wasn't very old, and his restaurant hadn't been open for very long. Although a few of his dishes were quite famous among the guests, in Beat's opinion, a part of it was due to the tone of his dishes. In order to become an outstanding chef, one must learn and practice over a long period of time. Talent was very important. Next, hard work and enough practice were also very important. Beat was confident that Mag would be able to achieve the first 2 criteria, but he didn't have enough practice, so he felt like he wouldn't be able to grasp the tastes of his customers very well. If Mag were to compete with him with a new dish that he had just invented, he was confident that he would be able to win. Although this dish was a new dish that he had just researched, he had already tasted it on a small scale. The feedback was very good, and it was the dish that he was most satisfied with after improving the roast pig. Meg put down his kitchen knife. He wasn't in a hurry to start cooking. Instead, he walked over to the judge's table and stopped in front of Hill. With a smile on his face, he said, "May I ask Miss Hill for a glass of the Buffett Manners red wine? Since Mr. Meg is in such a good mood, would you like to drink a glass of wine before cooking?" Hill looked at Meg and asked with a smile. "Others use high-quality bamboo wine to cook beef. After thinking about it, I think that only Miss Hill's red wine is better. Therefore, I would like to ask Miss Hill for a glass of red wine to cook with." Meg also looked at Hill with a smile. "I've never tasted beef cooked with red wine before. You really are an interesting chef, Mr. Meg." The smile on Hill's face widened. Meg's praise was very direct, but it was very effective. She raised a hand to signal to the waiter who was holding a bottle of red wine for her, and asked him to pour a glass of red wine for Meg. "Thank you." Meg accepted the glass of red wine and returned to the stove. He pulled out his kitchen knife from the knife rack and sliced through the pieces of beef before placing them onto a plate and marinating them with red wine. The high-quality ironhide bull tenderloin was tender and plump, and after the top-quality red wine was poured into the beef, the rich aroma of wine immediately wafted through the air, making the meat even more alluring. Red wine paired with beef and the faint scent of blood, it smells so good. Camilla took a sniff, and her eyes lit up as she looked at the plate in front of Meg. Bam! Chapter 645. The red magic flames had already been reduced to a small flame, and the black cauldron returned to its original position. The curved lid was lifted, and a rich aroma wafted out in all directions, making all of the guests' eyes light up. "It smells so good." Remi took a deep breath before opening her eyes, and she was staring at the black cauldron in front of Beat with sparkling eyes. Head chef Beat is almost done, but Mr. Mac has only just begun. "What are we going to do?" Vivian was a little concerned. "Don't worry, Father is super awesome, so there's no need to worry at all." Amy shook her head with a confident expression. "I feel like I'm going to be intoxicated by the aroma of the beef and the fragrance of the bamboo wine. This aroma is so special, it's going to be very delicious." Head chef Beat really is head chef Beat. This could very well become one of the signature dishes of Duca's restaurant. All of the guests were full of praise for Beat, and they had already been completely won over by the aroma. The aroma of the wine is indeed quite good, but the rank odor of the beef wasn't taken care of properly. Beef should be stewed with hot water. However, to be able to come up with the idea of using bamboo wine to stew beef, and to be able to create such a wonderful aroma, his creativity and culinary skills are indeed commendable. "Looks like I have to take the top chefs of this world seriously." Meg looked at Beat with a serious expression as he added all types of ingredients into the cauldron. In the past, he had thought that the food of this world was plastic, but it appeared that his definition wasn't correct. In this world, there was still a group of exceptional and innovative chefs. They were the true pieces of the puzzle that made up the food of this world. The food of Chaos City wasn't all that renowned on the Norland continent. Rodu was the true culinary capital, and all of the other races had their own unique cuisines. If I get the chance, perhaps I should go out and try out all of the unique delicacies of this world. At the same time, I'll be able to learn some cooking techniques and methods that belong to this world. Meg thought to himself. Beat's use of a magic cauldron and stove to cook the beef had given him a lot of inspiration. Even with the cooking utensils provided by the system, it was still very difficult for him to cook the beef in such a short time. That black cauldron was simply a piece of advanced technology. Moreover, the ingredients in this world were different from those on Earth. Ordinary ingredients were fine, but if he encountered some high-grade magical beasts with tough meat, it would take 3 days and 3 nights to stew them in an ordinary pot, let alone making delicious food. Magic pressure cooker, 1,000 gold coins each, comes with a magic heater. You can cast 3 spells for free. At this moment, the system's voice suddenly sounded. Meg raised his eyebrows and was a little speechless. "System, you really won't let go of any opportunity to make money. This system is dedicated to the development and design of kitchen products, so please don't worry. As long as the money is in place, there's nothing this system can't make. Moreover, it will only be better than them." The system sent a smiley emoticon. "You sure are arrogant." Meg pursed her lips and poured oil into the frying pan. At the same time, She cut the bell peppers and broccoli and placed them into the boiling pot. The frying pan was very big, so it could easily fry 6 steaks at the same time. The design of the magic stove was rather similar to that of a gas stove. After the switch was turned on, the intensity of the flame could be adjusted, and the energy source was provided by 3 fire crystals. These crystals were extracted from lava and contained extremely high amounts of fire elements. After being activated by a magic spell formation, they were converted into controllable energy, and became the basic component of a magic stove. This was the first time that Meg had used a magic stove, and aside from the fact that he needed some time to adjust to the heat, there were no other issues. As Beat added the ingredients and condiments into the frying pan, the aroma of beef became even more pronounced. He stirred the black pan with a long ladle, and steam rose up into the air. It was as if there were some magical powers that attracted everyone's attention, and many of them were already salivating. A pleased smile appeared on Spatch's face, and he nodded slightly. He took a glance at Meg, and his smile became even more vibrant. It was naturally a joyous occasion for him to be able to secure such a prosperous restaurant so easily. Furthermore, he would be able to garner the envious gazes of everyone at this banquet, thereby elevating the reputation and influence of Duca's restaurant once again. As for the task that the president had entrusted him with, he would be able to complete it perfectly. In Chaos City, Duca's restaurant was the #1 restaurant in the food and beverage industry. No one had been able to shake it in the past few decades, and no one would be able to do so in the future, either. Will Mr. Meg be able to turn things around? The Hill had already guessed some things as she took a glance at Spatch. However, if Meg couldn't even win a challenge like this, then it was clearly unrealistic for him to topple Duca's restaurant's dominance in Chaos City. As such, there was no need for the collaboration that they had envisioned. Business was business, after all, and she never made unprofitable investments. Everyone was eagerly waiting for Beat's beef stew to be ready, and Meg had only just picked up the ingredients before placing the 6 pieces of beef into the pan. Screech tilde tilde the beef that had been soaked in red wine was placed into the frying pan, and a delightful sizzling sound rang out. The rich aroma of red wine immediately wafted through the air, and the aroma of the beef was like a sharp sword that sliced a path through the aroma of the beef stew. This aroma is so special. The guests closest to Meg were the first to react, and their eyes lit up as they stared at the steak in the frying pan in front of Meg with incredulity in their eyes. That's a large steak. It doesn't look very appetizing, but the aroma is really enticing. As expected, the red wine from the Buffett winery is extraordinary. The wine that young Mistress Hill is drinking is the cream of the crop. I'm really looking forward to using this wine to cook beef. All of the guests were discussing quietly among themselves, and they were also quite interested in the beef stew that Meg was going to cook. Meg placed another small frying pan on another stove, and tossed in a piece of butter. He then tossed in all of the condiments, as well as half a bottle of black pepper, and a large bowl of water. At the same time, he began to boil the black pepper sauce. Head chef Beat is done, someone exclaimed softly. Everyone turned toward the source of the sound to find Beat ladling the beef into a series of small bowls. The tender beef was paired with golden potatoes, and the thick golden sauce was dripping from the bowls, creating an extremely appetizing sight. I'm done. Beat put down his ladle, and turned toward Meg. 2 waiters quickly strode forward, and carefully placed 5 bowls of beef stew in front of the 5 judges. Chapter 646. The stewed beef with potato had just been made overseas, and the cubes of dark brown beef had already been cooked to a crisp, but they were still in their cubes. The golden potatoes had also been sliced into cubes, and they were wrapped in a layer of thick golden broth. A rich aroma wafted through the air, and the eyes of all 5 of the judges immediately lit up. It looks like it's going to be delicious. I really want to know what beef tastes like when it's cooked like this. There's no doubt about head chef Beat's culinary skills. Just this aroma alone is enough to tell that this is going to be a must-order dish of Duca's restaurant. I'm going to try out this dish at Duca's restaurant tomorrow. I wonder if the restaurant will release a new dish right away. All of the guests craned their necks to look on. Many of them were regular customers of Duca's restaurant, and the exorbitant price of this dish was nothing to them. The aroma of the beef has been perfectly preserved, and it has become even richer after cooking. This is the first time that I've seen beef and potatoes being stewed together. I wonder what kind of surprise head chef Beat will bring me. Michael was the first to pick up his chopsticks, and he picked up a piece of potato and took a bite. The fragrant beef broth wrapped around the soft potato, and the more he chewed, the more fragrant it became. The potato was given a completely new texture and taste, and his eyes immediately lit up. He then picked up a piece of beef, and it was so soft that he almost couldn't pick it up. It melted in his mouth, and it was extremely delicious. The freshness of the beef had been perfectly preserved, and what was even more special was the rich aroma of the wine. The faint fragrance of the bamboo was perfectly absorbed by the beef, and the beef slid down his throat. It was delicious and refreshing, and the fragrance of the bamboo wine still lingered in his mouth. The beef is soft and refreshing, and the aroma of the bamboo wine has seeped into the beef perfectly. The freshness of the beef and the aroma of the wine are both present in my mouth at the same time. This taste is very good. Michael nodded with satisfaction before picking up another piece of beef and placing it into his mouth. Michael's evaluation created a small stir among the guests. It was a joyous occasion to be praised by the city lord, and most of them turned to look at the other judges. A trace of a smile appeared on Beat's face. He was used to hearing such praises every day, but when it came from the mouth of the city lord, it felt a little different. Beat looked up at Meg, who was still earnestly frying his steak, and his expression had completely relaxed. Meg's method of cooking beef was indeed very special, and at the very least, he had never seen it before. This meant that he wasn't lying, and this was indeed a new dish that he had only recently thought of. My chef managed to get his hands on some last time, and it cost him 10 dragon coins. However, that delicious flavor really is worth that price. The aroma of black pepper wafted through the air, and some of the people who had tasted black pepper in the past quickly identified this unique aroma. Black pepper? Beat looked at the steak in front of Meg with a surprised expression, and his brows furrowed slightly as he said, "I've never heard of black pepper being used to cook beef. Only when making roast pigs would they use a little bit of black pepper to enhance the flavor. Where did he get this black pepper? Please give this to Mrs. Bartoli, and the other 4 to the other 4 judges, with knives and forks." Meg pulled out one of the 4 portions and handed it to a waiter. He then picked up the last portion of steak, and pointed at Amy as he said, "After that, please give me a knife and fork, and give this portion to that little girl over there." Many people turned to Amy, who was standing beside Luna, and they couldn't help but think to themselves, he didn't forget to make a portion for his woman in the midst of a competition. He really is a good father. Wow, father made a portion for me as well. Amy's eyes immediately lit up at the sight of the waiter who was making his way over to her with a plate. This is a steak, and the way to eat it is to use a knife to slice the steak into small pieces, then dip a fork into the sauce before eating. Meg smiled at the judges, who had already placed their plates of steak on the table. He's using such good red wine to cook beef. What a waste. Camilla took a glance at Meg before picking up her knife and fork in a nonchalant manner. She then sliced open a corner of the steak before placing it into her mouth. This flavor. Camilla's eyes immediately widened. Rip. The neckline of her sexy tight-fitting dress was instantly torn apart. Chapter 647. Her clothes are torn apart. Meg looked at Camilla, whose collar had torn apart after taking a bite of the steak. His expression was a little strange, but his gaze was not polite at all. That alluring cleavage was even more turbulent now. Although the torn collar did not expose too much that should not be exposed, the strong visual effect and the sound of her clothes being torn apart still made the men present crane their necks a little. That black cat suddenly lifted its head from her arms and happened to block the men's line of sight. Its green eyes looked at everyone with a hint of warning. At this moment, Camilla seemed to be completely unaware of what had happened to her body. She was chewing the beef carefully and looking at the beef on the plate in front of her with a face full of disbelief. The steak was mixed with traces of blood, and the faint smell of blood wafted over as if it had not been fully cooked. However, it was this piece of beef that made Camilla feel completely irresistible. After biting into the half-cooked beef, There was not the slightest bit of rank odor. The meat and red wine overflowed from between her teeth, and the faint smell of blood and the mellow aroma of red wine blended perfectly, creating an extremely unique taste that was extremely delicious. What was even more surprising was the sauce. It looked like an extremely ordinary grey sauce, but it seemed to have a strong magical power. As soon as it entered her mouth, it wreaked havoc in her mouth. The flavors of various spices overlapped one another, and among them, there was a spicy fragrance that was extremely strong and unique. It was like a king that stood at the top of the other spices, opening up the taste buds on the tip of her tongue in an instant. It was as if there was a little elf jumping on the tip of her tongue. The beef collided with the slightly spicy sauce. The unique spices tore apart the beef's defense and blended perfectly with it. The freshness of the beef was once again raised to the extreme. While chewing the beef gently, Camilla felt as if she was in a bathtub filled with red wine. The gentle red wine gently patted her body, and the hot feeling spread from her throat to her chest. The warm feeling made her feel so comfortable that she wanted to moan. Camilla swallowed the beef and let out a soft moan. Looking at the beef in front of her, she exclaimed, "Delicious. Unbelievably delicious. Only this kind of red wine is worthy of such delicious beef." After saying that, he picked up the knife and cut off another piece of beef and put it into his mouth. The expression on his face was completely intoxicated by the delicious taste of the beef, and he didn't stop at all. Sounds of saliva being swallowed could be heard from the crowd, but no one knew if it was because of the steak that Camilla had praised, or because of the beauty that was a feast for the eyes. Is it really that delicious? Moreover, even his clothes were torn apart. Hill glanced at Camilla before looking at the steak in front of her. She hesitated for a moment before picking up the knife and fork to elegantly cut off a piece of beef and put it into her mouth. At the same time, she consciously tugged at her collar. Slash. There was a slight sound of cloth tearing, and Hill's clothes were torn apart from her hands. A touch of delicate white jumped out from the collar, causing people to be lost in wild and fanciful thoughts. However, Mr. Hill did not notice this at all. He slowly closed his eyes and savored the delicious beef that was wreaking havoc in his mouth. Mr. Hill wasn't an alcoholic, but she would drink a small cup of the fine wine produced by her family's winery every night before going to bed. It could promote sleep and beautify one's appearance. Therefore, she was very familiar with the taste of this red wine. If the stewed beef made by Beet with bamboo wine gave her a unique feeling, then this steak made with the red wine that she provided gave her a pleasant surprise. There wasn't much red wine in the beef, and it was just enough to remove the impurities of the beef without destroying the natural freshness of the beef. The beef wasn't completely cooked, but after cutting it open, there wasn't the slightest hint of blood or the smell of blood. Instead, the texture was exceptionally tender. Unlike the soft texture of the beef made by Beet, this was a completely different fresh and tender texture. After chewing it carefully, the meat juices and red wine of the beef perfectly blended with the unique sauce, bringing about a delicious storm that swept through all the taste buds in the mouth. Mr. Hill was no stranger to the taste of black pepper. Her family's chef would often add this expensive condiment into some of his dishes. However, compared to Meg, her family's chef was more like a clumsy student. He wasn't able to elevate the flavor of a dish to a whole new level with just a single condiment like Meg. The juicy steak was slowly chewed in her mouth, and it gave her a completely different feeling from the kebabs she had tasted in the past. However, the flavor was still the same. Of course, what was even more incredible to Mr. Hill was the slightly scorching sensation in her chest, which gave her the feeling that it was about to regrow. This is one of the most delicious beef I've ever tasted. The only beef that can compare to it is the kebabs made by Mr. Meg himself. Mr. Hill slowly opened his eyes and adjusted his collar in a calm manner. He looked at Meg with genuine praise in his eyes, then picked up his knife and fork and continued to eat his steak. If it were possible, there was no woman who wouldn't want that part of her body to grow. As expected, Mr. Mac, you really are able to surprise me every single time. This beef is simply superb. It's so delicious that I can't stop eating it. Michael ate a piece of beef with a wide smile on his face. He then quickly sliced another piece of beef and placed it into his mouth before nodding with a satisfied expression. How can there be anyone in this world who can make beef so delicious? There's no one who can resist such delicious food. In comparison, Beet's beef is simply horrendous. This Meg guy's cooking skills are way too good. K-Rawls stared at the beef in front of him with incredulity in his eyes. He abruptly turned to Meg, and his eyes immediately lit up as he said, "Here's the one I'm looking for. If he can go to Rodu and make beef like this for His Majesty will definitely be very happy, and Prince Josh will definitely value me even more when he ascends to the throne." Meanwhile, Geoffrey's eyes lit up slightly after taking a bite of the beef. He didn't immediately say anything. Instead, he sliced another piece of beef and placed it into his mouth. After chewing carefully, he nodded as he said, "It's very good." How is this possible?" Spatcher's body swayed unsteadily, and he had to grab onto the pillar beside him to prevent himself from falling over. It wasn't that he was a sore loser. What he was concerned about was that his status had been shaken by this man who had appeared out of nowhere. Was Dukas still number one in the Aden Square? Beet stared blankly at the panel of judges as he murmured to himself, "Is this a crushing gap? Amy, is the beef delicious?" Chapter 648. Even Countess Bartoli and young Mistress Hill can't stop eating. Just how delicious is this steak? That's right, the president only gave his evaluation after taking 2 bites, right? Even though it's not bad, the word very in front indicates that he's more satisfied with this steak than head chef Beet's stewed beef. The city lord is full of praise for this delicacy. I suddenly feel like going to Mr. Mac's restaurant to try it. All of the guests were discussing quietly among themselves with undisguised curiosity and anticipation on their faces. The aroma of the beef was intermingled with the unique aroma of black pepper, and they couldn't help but salivate. There were also many people who were looking at the half-elf girl who had placed her plate on a stool and was happily slicing the beef in a slightly clumsy manner. She picked up a piece of beef with her fork before placing it into her little mouth and chewing on it. Her little cheeks were puffed up with joy, and there was a blissful smile on her little face. There was even a drop of sauce hanging from the corner of her mouth, and the way she ate was extremely alluring, making it impossible for anyone to look away. "Little Amy, don't think that I won't beat you up just because you're cute. If you piss me off, I'll be super fierce." Vivian was a little angry as she looked at Amy, who was holding a piece of beef with her fork. She didn't think that there would be a day when she would be teased by a little kid. "Is that so?" Amy looked at Vivian with an aggrieved expression before handing her fork over to Luna, and said in a pitiable voice, "Teacher Luna, big sister Vivian is yelling at me, so I'll give you the beef. We're not going to be friends with her anymore. That's enough. Why are you acting like a child?" Luna looked at Vivian with an exasperated smile before patting Amy's head. "If teacher doesn't want to eat, then Amy can have it herself. Who isn't a baby?" Vivian harumphed coldly before looking at the piece of beef in Amy's hand. She then said in a quiet voice, "Look at those 2 women. Mr. Mac must have put something indescribable in this beef, so it's best if you don't eat it. Then, Sister Vivian, do you want some?" Amy turned her fork to Vivian. The beef that had been dipped in the sauce exuded an alluring aroma. Just the sight of the tender and juicy beef was enough to make one salivate. Vivian slowly clenched her fists, and after a long period of internal conflict, she gripped her fork with a determined expression as she said, "I'm going to taste it for Luna, even if he put something strange in the beef." After saying that, Vivian ate the beef on her fork in one bite, leaving behind a speechless Luna and a blinking Amy. Yes. This smell. Vivian felt as if she had been dragged into a large wine cellar, surrounded by wooden barrels filled with red wine. Then, she was quickly dragged to a vast grassland. She sat on the back of a bison and galloped forward. A violent storm rose up from the grassland, battering the bison and her body. Although Vivian was already mentally prepared, she still felt as if her clothes were being torn apart by the violent storm. She felt completely out of control. Fortunately, she was wearing a small jacket over her skirt today. After covering her chest immediately, she didn't let anyone see what she shouldn't have. What delicious beef! The texture of the beef is unbelievably tender, and the combination of the rich aroma of the red wine and the sauce brings about an unparalleled taste. Vivian opened her eyes and exclaimed with a slightly red face. She didn't know if it was because of the mellow red wine or something else. She knew what was going to happen, but she still couldn't control her mouth. Luna shook her head in exasperation. She removed the silk scarf embroidered with golden lilies from her shoulders and draped it over Vivian's shoulders. She looked at Meg, who was standing not far away, and a smile appeared on her face. It seemed like there was nothing that he couldn't do. Not far away, Gloria also heaved a sigh of relief. She looked at the faint smile on Meg's face from the side. It seemed like he was always this confident and steady, no matter what the situation was. It was as if everything was already within his expectations, and the people around him all felt reassured. I hope that one day, I can also become a powerful and confident person like Mr. Meg. Gloria slowly clenched her fists as she made up her mind. Ding! A crisp sound rang out as the fork came into contact with the plate. Camilla was slightly taken aback at the sight of the clean plate in front of her. She didn't think that an entire piece of beef and all the colorful side dishes would be finished without her realizing it. Furthermore, even after eating so much, she still felt like she hadn't had her fill. The delicious flavor lingered in her mouth. This guy's culinary skills are much better than Beats. Furthermore, his figure is quite well proportioned, and his mustache is a little sexy. Most importantly, if I could eat such delicious beef every day when I wake up, that kind of life would be very enjoyable, right? Camilla looked at Meg as she licked her bright red lips with the tip of her tongue. Crap. It's the feeling of falling in love. Camilla suddenly stopped what she was doing, and she looked at Meg with a conflicted expression as she shook her head. No, how can we fall in love when we're of different genders? There's no way I'll choose a man. Camilla turned her gaze to Gloria, and her eyes lit up again. She nodded in satisfaction. This banquet wasn't a wasted trip. He'll also put down his cutlery before gently wiping his lips with a silk handkerchief. He was looking at Meg with an unbridled smile on his face. Looks like the food and beverage industry in Chaos City is really going to change. Mr. Meg has given me an even bigger surprise than I had imagined, Hill thought to himself as he glanced at Jeffrey, and the smile on his face widened even further. Jeffrey also put down his cutlery. There was still half a piece of beef left on his plate, but those who knew him well knew that he was already very satisfied with this piece of beef. The only thing that was left was his rigid requirement for his appetite. Jeffrey accepted a wet towel from a waiter before wiping his mouth and hands. He then turned his gaze to Meg, and no one knew what he was thinking. Michael put down his cutlery with a smile, and said, "Seeing as everyone's finished eating, let's announce the results. Even though Beat's beef stew is also quite good, Mr. Mac's beef stew is even more amazing to me, so I choose Mr. Mac." Chapter 649. Head Chef Beat's beef stew is very delicious, but in comparison, Mr. Meg's steak is clearly more to my liking. As such, I choose Mr. Meg, Mr. Hill said with a smile. I choose him. This is how beef should be cooked, Camilla said as she looked at Meg with a contemplative look in her eyes. The 4 judges had already made their decisions, and everyone turned to Jeffrey. Jeffrey's decision wouldn't affect the outcome of the competition, but he was still the president, after all, so his decision would still have a lot of influence. Spatch clenched his fists as he stared intently at Jeffrey. As long as Jeffrey was still on his side, then he wouldn't be considered to have lost today. Meg was also looking at Jeffrey. This old man's expression hadn't changed much throughout the entire competition, and he was struck by the feeling that he was reminded of his old man. Old foxes like him who had spent their entire lives in the business world were the most difficult to deal with as there was no way to guess what they were thinking. In contrast, this old man had single-handedly created and expanded the Aden Chamber of Commerce. If he wanted to overturn the racial discrimination rules of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, the easiest way would be to get this old man to step down from his position as the president, and then amend those rules. Jeffrey paid no heed to all of the gazes directed at him, and calmly said, "In this competition, Mr. Meg's steak is more delicious than the beef cooked by head chef Beat of Duca's restaurant. I vote for Mr. Meg." Mr. Meg received a unanimous vote. I really didn't think that this would be the outcome. I can't believe that someone was able to secure a unanimous victory in the competition with head chef Beat. I have a feeling that this Immerse restaurant is going to become very popular in Chaos City. Just who is this Meg? He suddenly appeared out of nowhere and threw Chaos City's food and beverage industry into disarray. After the dust settled, a commotion broke out in the crowd. From the beginning of the duel to the announcement of the results, it could be said that there were ups and downs. Except for a few people who had eaten at Immerse, no one had expected such an outcome. Apart from lamenting the outcome of the duel, the guests were most concerned about Meg. This man had won the favor of Miss Hill and the City Lord from the very beginning, and he had defeated head chef Beat in a cooking duel with an absolute advantage. He was destined to be the man who attracted the most attention tonight. Most of the guests present were the most outstanding businessmen in Chaos City. Their keen sense of smell allowed them to easily determine a person's value. A rising star like Meg was clearly the best person to befriend. How is this possible? Cyril couldn't believe what he was seeing as he looked at the triumphant Meg and dejected Beat. This was far from what he had expected. Meg's expression darkened upon hearing this. As expected, the system was completely unreliable. Ding! Congratulations to the host for securing victory in the cooking competition. You have received a chance to enter the God of Cookery promotion lottery. Ding! Congratulations to the host for completing the additional mission of attracting hatred. You have received a chance to enter the God of Cookery promotion lottery. The system's voice sounded. Mr. Meg is indeed a prodigy chef, and this is a good thing for all of the chefs in Chaos City. Beat took a deep breath as he looked at Meg with a serious expression, and said, however, I firmly believe that your cooking method isn't the only correct and delicious way to cook beef. I hope that we'll have another chance to have a beef competition in the future. I can wait for you. Meg nodded as he looked at Beat with a hint of a smile in his eyes. This was a true chef. This was quite interesting. Father won. Father is indeed the most powerful. Amy yelled with elation as she raised her knife and fork high into the air. Amy's adorable demeanor also made many people smile. All of the negative traits of half-breeds were completely absent from her body, and they couldn't help but wonder if their prejudices against half-breeds had been misplaced. Chapter 650. A spectacular cooking competition was an interesting interlude to the evening banquet. With City Lord Michael and President Jeffrey present, the shop that Spatch had promised naturally belonged to Meg. Apart from getting a shop, being noticed by the core circle of Chaos City's business circle was also a huge gain for Meg. Meg was undoubtedly the biggest winner of the evening banquet. However, all of the merchants who wanted to forge a better relationship with Meg all stopped in their tracks when they saw Meg making his way toward the VIP seats on the side of the hill. Compared to the beautiful and wealthy young Mistress Hill, all of them were middle-aged men with large bellies, so they clearly didn't have anything that could attract Meg's attention. However, the merchants didn't stop talking to each other because of Meg. The annual mid-year banquet was a gathering for all of the top merchants in Chaos City. Every year, many major deals were struck during the banquet, and countless opportunities could be found during the banquet. All of the men were busy looking for opportunities to brag about how much their net worth had increased in the past 6 months. Meanwhile, the women began to form small cliques, inadvertently showing off which master had made the gemstone rings on their fingers, how much they had paid, or how much they had pulled in order to secure them, thereby drawing envious glances from the crowd. This was a topic that never went out of style among women, especially women like them who only had to think about how to spend money every day. Miss Gloria's dress is so beautiful, it accentuates her figure and her skin so well. Indeed. I feel like I'm a celestial maiden in that dress. If I could also get one custom made, my husband would definitely be unable to take his eyes off of it. I wonder which master in Chaos City designed such a beautiful dress. Why haven't I heard anything about it? Of course, most of the attention was focused on Gloria, who was standing at the center of a group of women. She looked as if she had walked out of a painting, and her blue dress was glowing with a dazzling light, making her the center of everyone's attention. Gloria was a very prestigious woman, and the origin of her dress was even more of a source of intrigue for all of the women present. They wanted nothing more than to ask her which master tailor had made that dress so that they could get one custom-made before other women. Gloria was a little nervous with her hands crossed in front of her lower abdomen, but she maintained a faint smile on her face as she spoke to the noblewomen in an elegant and peaceful manner. "Miss Gloria, your dress is so beautiful. If I may ask, which master tailor made it?" A woman with heavy makeup turned to Gloria with a smile on her face. As soon as that was said, all of the voices around them became a lot softer. All of the women listened intently, and subconsciously inched closer to Gloria. Mag was a little dazed. Such fine wine seemed to lose its luster if he didn't pour it into a goblet. Although the crystal glass was expensive, it couldn't compare to the elegance of a goblet. "Mr. Mag, what do you think of the matter that I mentioned?" Hill sat across from Meg and took a sip of wine. The vibrant red wine made her lips even redder, and they appeared especially alluring under the dim yellow light. "I'm sorry, Miss Hill, but I don't plan on joining the Aden Chamber of Commerce. Some of the rules of the Aden Chamber of Commerce go against the principles and ideals that I've always adhered to." Meg gently placed the wine glass in his hand on the table, and shook his head as he looked at Hill. This girl was indeed very beautiful. She was like a vibrant red rose, but with thorns. Chapter 651. Hill put down her wineglass, and looked into Meg's eyes as she said, "I also think that many of the Aden Chamber of Commerce's rules are unreasonable, and are leading the Aden Chamber of Commerce down a slippery slope. Hence, I hope that Mr. Meg can change it with me. I look forward to Ms. Hill's vision, but I won't fire MIA as the price for joining the Aden Chamber of Commerce." Meg shook his head as he looked at the furrowed brows of Hill, and continued, "Furthermore, I don't think that my joining the Aden Chamber of Commerce will be of much help to your election, Ms. Hill. With Mr. Meg's culinary skills, it's only a matter of time before Mammis reaches the top of the Aden Square. In the future, no other restaurant will be able to compete with Mammis. When that time comes, Mr. Meg will have a lot of say in the food and beverage industry in Chaos City. The food and beverage industry is an important part of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, and it's also an important part of the election." Ms. Hill leaned forward slightly as she looked at Meg with a serious expression. Meg looked at Ms. Hill with a smile, and said, "Although I don't know much about the Aden Chamber of Commerce, I know that President Jeffrey has absolute control over the Aden Chamber of Commerce. If Ms. Hill is only going to follow this strategy and gradually encroach on the Aden Chamber of Commerce, your chances of winning this election are very slim, right? Or rather, what you're planning is actually the next election. Mr. Meg is indeed a smart man." Ms. Hill faltered slightly before a smile quickly appeared on her face. She leaned back comfortably in her chair, and nodded at Meg as she said, "I'll fight for this election, but the chances of success are slim, so I'm more focused on the next election. We're still young, but Jeffrey is already old, isn't that right?" "Yes, Ms. Hill is only 18 years old, and she'll only be 23 in 5 years. President Jeffrey can't wait that long." Meg nodded as he looked at Ms. Hill with a sigh. Prodigies were not rare in the business world. He had seen many prodigies on Wall Street in his previous life. However, Hill, who was so patient at such a young age and was willing to spend 5 years to set things up, was more like an experienced businessman than those impatient geniuses. She knew her advantages, and how to maximize her benefits. A woman like her was very tempting. "Mr. Meg, would you be willing to wait with me for 5 years? When that happens, Mammy Restaurant will become the #1 restaurant in the Aden Square, and all those terrible rules will be abolished." She looked at Mag with a smile. "5 years is too long. I'm seizing every minute." Meg shook his head as he looked at Ms. Hill, who was sitting lazily in her chair. He lowered his voice as he said, "Cooking might not change the outcome of the election, but I have something interesting that might be able to change the structure of the Aden Chamber of Commerce in a short time. Would Ms. Hill be interested?" "What is it, Mr. Meg?" Ms. Hill asked with a smile as she leaned back in her chair. "Ms. Hill, you should know something about the steam engine that President Hyder is researching, right?" Meg asked with a smile. "Could it be?" Ms. Hill sat up straight as she looked at Meg in shock. "Yes. If I tell you that I have the technology for the complete version of the steam engine, would you believe me, Ms. Hill? Meg nodded. Ms. Hill looked at Meg with disbelief in her eyes, but she quickly concealed her emotions. She nodded and said, "If it were someone else, I wouldn't believe it, but Mr. Meg, I believe you. You are a smart man. Ms. Hill is also a smart woman. You should know what kind of impact the steam engine will have on this world." I actually don't know what kind of impact it will have on this world, but I have a feeling that it will change the world. I just didn't think that it would be developed by Mr. Meg. Ms. Hill looked at Meg with a complex expression. She was in charge of funding Hyder. Every quarter, she would meet with Hyder and listen to him talk about the development of the steam engine, as well as the direction in which it might be used in the future. Although she didn't know anything about machinery, her keen sense of smell told her that it was something that could change the world 3 years ago. If ordinary ores could be turned into energy that could be controlled, it was hard to imagine what kind of changes would occur in the world. And the first person to master this technology would be the one to lead this revolution and obtain countless opportunities. This was also why her research in Hyder had been stagnant for so long, but she still invested a lot of money in them every year. But now, Meg said that he had completely mastered this technology. This was a huge shock to Ms. Hill. Dean Hyder has given me a lot of inspiration, but the complete version of the steam engine was developed by me alone. But if we want to use it on a large scale, the City Lord's castle and the Buffett family are obviously good choices. Meg nodded slightly. Ms. Hill's performance showed that she had some understanding of the steam engine, which saved him a lot of time. I already have some ideas about how to use the steam engine. If Ms. Hill has time, maybe you can listen to my ideas. Tomorrow is fine. I want to see the steam engine that Mr. Meg has developed. Is that okay? Ms. Hill asked directly. Yes, Ms. Hill can come to the restaurant after lunch tomorrow. Meg was a little surprised by Ms. Hill's straightforwardness, but he still nodded. I think this will be an interesting collaboration. Ms. Hill raised her wine glass. My thoughts exactly. Meg raised his glass and clinked it gently with Ms. Hill's before taking a sip of red wine at the same time. Right at this moment, Vivian's voice sounded, "Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Vivian. I'd like to take a moment of your time to listen to some words that my good friend, Chaos School's teacher, Luna, would like to share with all of you." Mag turned his head to the side in surprise. On the stage at the side of the banquet hall, Vivian passed something that looked like a megaphone to Luna before jumping off the stage. The banquet hall gradually fell silent, and everyone turned to look at Luna on the stage. A beam of light fell upon her, and her light green dress paired with her intricate features gave off a very warm and friendly feeling. Chapter 652. Everyone listened in silence to Luna's speech about giving homeless children a safe haven and giving them a chance to go to school. The expressions on the guests' faces didn't change much. Vivian was the daughter of the City Lord, and she wanted everyone to listen, so everyone listened obediently. It wasn't because of how touching the stories were, but because of Vivian, or rather, the City Lord. "Teacher Luna. You've always been so good." Amy looked up at Luna with tears shimmering in her bright blue eyes. As expected, her eyes really do shine when she's doing something like this. Vivian looked at Luna with a smile on her face. Her brows furrowed slightly as she looked at the well-dressed merchants. These people didn't seem to be as enthusiastic as she had expected. Meg was also looking at Luna the entire time. This young mistress of a noble family from Rodu had come all the way to Chaos City to become a teacher. She had always been dedicated to helping homeless children and planting the seeds of hope in their hearts. There were some people in this world who didn't care about returns or gains. They were dedicated to doing things that others saw as idiots and did things that were difficult and unrewarding. People like that were known as saints. Meg didn't have any feelings toward saints, but he agreed with this world because those who were known as saints were gentle and adorable. Luna wasn't a complete saint, but the kind of tolerance and love that she exuded made Meg feel very touched. If it weren't for her, Amy and Alex would have had an even more difficult time in Chaos City during the past 3 years. She was the one who planted the seeds of kindness and hope in Amy despite her poverty. How could anyone not want to get close to such an adorable person? Perhaps, I should also do something. Meg thought to himself. The restaurant was already on the right track, and the ice cream shop's business was also booming. It wasn't difficult for him to fork out a small portion of the funds. Hill's gaze darted between Meg and Luna, and he asked curiously, "Mr. Meg, what's your relationship with her? So there are so many poor children." Gloria looked at Luna with pity on her face. "What a good girl. But it's very hard to be a good person." Camilla shook her head, and shifted her gaze from Luna to Gloria. She stroked the head of the black cat in her arms, and softly said, "Little Black, what do you think I should do to trick this beautiful young mistress into falling in love with me? Madam, given her identity, I suggest you give up on this idea. Chaos City won't sit by and watch the young mistress of family Morton be taken away. Also, consult me, Caesar." The black cat resisted, and tried to move its head away from that pair of bright red fingernails, but it couldn't escape from that pair of white and slender claws. "Do you think this madam would use such a lowly method to kidnap someone?" Camilla smiled disdainfully. She looked at Gloria, and licked her lips slowly. "If I can't win her heart, how can I unlock more positions? I wonder who was the one who kept saying, 'Take her away, take him away.'" The black cat rolled its eyes. "Shut up." Camilla's hand clenched into a fist, and she punched the black cat's head. She looked at Gloria seriously, and said, "This time, I will use my charm to conquer this beautiful young mistress." Meow Tilda the black cat meowed pitifully. "This matter should be settled by the City Lord's castle, but the City Lord's castle really can't afford it. I didn't expect Luna to think of a way to solve this. If Oldfield knew about this, he would definitely write me a letter." Michael looked at Luna, and shook his head shamefully. Geoffrey stood beside him, and frowned slightly. No one knew what he was thinking. "Dream on." Cyril looked at Luna with a sneer. "I want to set up a foundation to raise funds for these children to buy their daily necessities and ensure their survival. At the same time, I want to try my best to create opportunities for them to learn." Luna's voice paused. She looked at the wealthy businessman below the stage and sincerely said, "I wonder if all the ladies and gentlemen here are willing to contribute the first batch of funds to the foundation." The entire venue was still silent. The guests subconsciously avoided Luna's gaze, and no one stepped forward. "These bastards." Vivian clenched her fists tightly. She had anticipated that these stingy merchants wouldn't donate money so easily, but she didn't think that no one would support them. These people were so stingy that they controlled the vast majority of Chaos City's wealth. Luna's expectant gaze gradually turned into disappointment. She had experienced this many times before, and very few fundraising opportunities in the Aiden Square were successful. However, she still wasn't able to raise enough money for the children in front of so many businessmen. "Teacher Luna, I'm willing to donate all of my money to buy food for them." Right at this moment, a tender voice sounded. Everyone turned toward the source of the voice, and saw a little half-elf girl raising her little hand. She took 2 steps forward with a solemn expression, and stood on her tiptoes as she extended her hand toward Luna. "It's that little half-elf girl, Mr. Meg's daughter," someone exclaimed. "Amy." Luna faltered slightly at the sight of Amy standing on her tiptoes with her little hand raised. Her eyes lit up again, and she squatted down as she extended her hand toward Amy. Amy placed her little hand on Luna's hand before releasing it. The 2 copper coins reflected a dazzling light under the light. "Teacher Luna, this is money that I saved up myself. Even Father doesn't know about it. Now, I'm giving it all to you to buy food for them." Amy looked at Luna with a solemn expression. "I'll make good use of it." Luna slowly clenched her hand and nodded earnestly. Even though it was only 2 small copper coins, they were very heavy in her hand. "Good luck, Teacher Luna, you're the best." Amy clenched her little fists as she looked up at Luna with a sweet smile. All of the guests were suddenly struck by a sense of shame upon seeing this, and hesitation appeared on their faces. Chapter 653. The banquet hall was in an uproar because of Cyril's words. The guilt that had just risen in their hearts was blown away like dust by the wind, and a smug and arrogant smile appeared on their faces again. Yes, why should they give money to those lowly and vile fellows? They were just the vermin of Chaos City. Although Luna had wrapped those fellows up with a sad and touching story, in the end, what did the lives of those homeless children who cursed them behind their backs and even had designs on them have to do with them? Cyril listened to those approving words and gazes, and the smile on his face became even more smug. Class was insurmountable. In Chaos City, these merchants in the banquet hall were the highest class. They were standing here, and their children were receiving the best education in Chaos School. After they graduated, some of them would become honorable knights and magic casters, and most of them would inherit their family properties and continue to maintain their noble status and that superior class. Cyril was the representative of this class. Ever since he could remember, he knew that he was destined to be completely different from ordinary people in this life. That was a boundary that could not be crossed. And those lowly and vile homeless children, what right did they have to study in the same school as the sons of nobles? What right did they have to leave that class? If they all became knights and magic casters, who would continue to work for them? How could they show off their noble status in the luxurious carriages? Although those shabbily dressed fellows squatting in the streets and alleys did not look very likable, those pairs of envious eyes were the easiest way for them to gain pleasure. Cyril knew what these merchants were thinking, because he was thinking the same thing. Therefore, he knew that he had said the right thing at the right time, and successfully attracted the attention of the entire banquet hall. He had won back some ground from Gloria. That was what these merchants were thinking. If the merchants only think about how to make money, and not give back to Chaos City, what's the use of keeping them? Michael had already stood up, and was holding the railing of the VIP seats with an expressionless face. Geoffrey's lips moved, but he still did not say anything. He looked at Cyril with a cold gaze. How did this guy become the successor of Family Morton with his intellect? In comparison, Miss Gloria seems to be more intelligent. She might become a good opponent in the future. She took a glance at Cyril, and shook his head with a mocking smile. His gaze then fell on Gloria, who was wearing a blue dress, and his gaze became quite sharp, as if he were a cheetah that had discovered its prey. Luna looked at Cyril, looked at the mocking smiles on their faces, and suddenly felt a chill in her heart. She had imagined many outcomes, but when these seemingly polite merchants tore off their disguises, it still made her shudder. She didn't even know how to deal with them. Bastard. You're talking nonsense. They were not scum. They are all my little friends. They are all very smart. Amy opened her arms and stood in front of Luna. She looked at Cyril with a serious expression on her face. Two small balls of fire and ice flames were slowly dancing in her palms. Oh, little friends. Cyril looked at Amy. This little brat was as disgusting as her father. He sneered and said, "So, you were once a vagrant on the streets. You also received charity from others? Is that why you are so uncultured as to call me a bastard and show off your fireballs? Is your father a boorish chef who only knows how to cook?" Some of the guests burst into laughter upon hearing this. Even though Mag had displayed a lot of potential and had a powerful background, there was still a significant gap between him and Cyril. As such, it wasn't a difficult decision to make. "Are you laughing at my father?" Amy raised her head and asked with a serious expression. "Laughing? Maybe." Cyril shrugged, and the smile on his face became more exaggerated. "Then, you can die." Amy raised her hand, and the red flames and blue flames in her palms instantly soared. The hot temperature and extreme coldness descended at the same time, and the surrounding guests subconsciously retreated. "Protect young Master Cyril." The guards in charge of the banquet were shocked and quickly rushed in this direction. Cyril was also given a fright, and he reflexively stumbled back a couple of steps. He looked at the dancing flames and ice flames, and calmed himself down as he chuckled coldly, "I'm standing right here. Hit me if you want." As soon as he finished speaking, a lotus formed by the fusion of ice flames and flames flew towards him and appeared in front of him in a flash. Cyril's eyes widened. It was a bright lotus, as if it was carved by a craftsman, but the terrifying energy contained in it made him feel despair. The banquet guards were not far away, But these knights couldn't block him before the lotus landed on him. Camilla, who had the power to save him, was standing to the side with a smile while hugging the black cat. City Lord Michael held the railing with both hands, and had no intention of intervening. Shock and panic appeared on the faces of the guests, and a large empty space appeared behind Cyril. No one dared to believe that such a scene would appear at the mid-year banquet of the Aden Chamber of Commerce. If Cyril died, how would the banquet end? This thought flashed through the minds of countless people at the same time, and it was an unimaginable result. At this moment, a foot in a shiny black leather shoe landed on Cyril's butt. Cyril, who was rooted to the spot, was sent flying like a cannonball. His face rubbed against the smooth and flat floor for a few meters before his face stopped. The speed of the ice and fire lotus suddenly decreased, and then it exploded behind Cyril. Just like that, the luxurious red and green robe was blown into pieces, revealing a grayish-black butt and a somewhat shameful wail. "Young Master Cyril, there are some requests that you can't casually make to children. My Amy is so obedient, and if you ask her to hit you, she definitely won't refuse. You'll be teaching children the wrong things." Meg withdrew the leg that was in the midst of the side kick, and reached out to block the stinging scene for Amy. He looked at Cyril, who was wrapping the tablecloth that the guards had draped over him tightly with grief and indignation, and shook his head. Furthermore, a person's education isn't determined by their social class or wealth. For example, you, who are full of trash and casually judge a group of people as trash, jumped up because a child called you a bad guy. Your education is really amazing. I'll donate 10% of the ice cream shop's income to Teacher Luna's foundation. What she does is true education, Meg said calmly as he swept his gaze across everyone present. Chapter 654. A smile appeared on Mag's face as he looked at Gloria. He didn't expect Gloria to be the first one to come out and support him. This maiden was braver than he had imagined. Other than Cyril's low EQ and IQ, his rigid social class mentality was what gave him the confidence to stand out. However, Meg couldn't understand why Jeffrey insisted on grooming such a brainless guy to be Family Morton's successor. Wasn't this pushing the whole family into a fire pit? There was nothing wrong with a son inheriting his father's business, but first of all, this son couldn't be a hopeless fool. His father was much smarter back then. He knew that he didn't have the heart nor the ability to inherit the family business, so he found a professional manager to manage the company. It was easier and more efficient than forcing him to squander on stage. In comparison, Gloria, who had just started to adapt to her role, showed Meg more potential and value. This young woman appeared to be weak and frail, but her ability to execute and judge the situation was clearly far superior to Cyril's. At least someone with a brain wouldn't say such things in front of the Castellan. The banquet hall was silent. The guests looked at the embarrassed Cyril with strange expressions on their faces. The second young master of Family Morton, the director of the Aden Chamber of Commerce, was embarrassed by a 4-year-old girl's magic. However, Mag was able to shift all the blame onto Cyril with just a few words, and it was even as if he was denouncing Cyril for his crimes. Everyone couldn't help but burst into laughter. Of course, what was even more shocking was that after Meg expressed his intention to donate to Luna's foundation, Gloria also expressed her intention to donate 1/10 of her income to the foundation. Gloria was the eldest daughter of Family Morton. In terms of status, she was Cyril's niece. Now that she expressed her intention to donate, it was undoubtedly a slap in the face to Cyril's previous words. As the two candidates for Family Morton's successor, the competition for the position of successor to the Morton family was intense. On the other hand, Gloria, who was originally looked down upon by the public, directly stood on the opposite side of Cyril after her stunning debut. This also changed the public's opinion of her. This beautiful young mistress reminded him of the young mistress of the Buffett family. She was now firmly in control of the Buffett family. Would Jeffrey, who had always favored males over females, hand over the position of the family head to Gloria like old Buffett? This question had attracted everyone's attention. I didn't expect someone to beat me to it. Hill stood at the entrance of the VIP seats and looked at Gloria with a bit of annoyance. This little girl is quite creative. A smile reappeared on Michael's face as he looked at Gloria. Then, he turned to Amy, and the smile on his face became even more pronounced. Never put all of your eggs in one basket was a business principle that he believed in. Partnering with the Hill could potentially change the Aden Chamber of Commerce, and investing in Gloria could potentially upend family Morton from within, thereby changing the Aden Chamber of Commerce. How is this possible? Cyril looked at Gloria's blue dress with incredulity in his eyes. The dress that Gloria was wearing had undoubtedly attracted the attention of everyone present. If such a dress that could make all of the women go crazy were to be released from her clothing store, one could only imagine how many orders she was going to receive. Furthermore, from the moment that she had appeared until now, she had already successfully promoted the blue suede and her dress to all of the guests. Cyril couldn't even begin to imagine what kind of profits these noble women with the most purchasing power in Chaos City were going to bring to her clothing store. However, one thing that he was sure of was that as long as Gloria could provide enough dresses, not only would Suede Textiles Shop's losses be turned into profits, it would also quickly become a profitable business. Cyril placed a hand on the shoulder of the knight beside him, and was suddenly struck by a sense of dejection. He had clearly lost this challenge to Suede, and Gloria's threat to him was no longer just a joke. She really didn't give me a chance at all. Camilla had just taken a step forward when she withdrew her foot again, and was feeling a little vexed. I think she might like men, the black cat murmured in a low voice. Chapter 655. This dress is from Miss Gloria's own clothing store. It's called Suede, right? Hurry up and write down this important piece of information. We'll go to the store tomorrow morning and pre-order one. It looks like the battle for family Morton's successor is starting to shift from Cyril's complete domination. That's right. If Miss Gloria can display her superb business acumen, who knows if the president will choose her like Master Ian. Some of the women who hadn't heard the news before were very interested in it, and the businessmen began to ponder the information that had just been divulged. If they had to choose a side in the future, this information would be very important. Hertie and Herney's expressions darkened. Gloria's disregard was even more unacceptable to them than her insults. It was as if she was telling them that she was no longer on the same level as them. Jeffrey, are you planning to hand over family Morton to this little girl like Ian? I think her EQ and IQ are comparable to that of the Buffett family's girl. Michael turned to Jeffrey with a smile. Even though his tone was relaxed, his gaze was very sharp. I've given her a chance, but whether she can grasp it or not will depend on her own abilities. If a woman wants to be in power, she has to put in more effort. Jeffrey looked at Gloria and shook his head slightly. Compared to the Buffett family's girl, she's far from enough. Don't be so smug. Not everyone's girl grows up in a bank like the Buffett family's girl, Michael said with a smile. Jeffrey didn't say anything in response. However, he was looking at Gloria with a hint of gratification in his eyes. No one knew what he was thinking. Big sister is so awesome today. It feels like she's a completely different person. Mickey looked at Gloria standing in the crowd with his mouth slightly agape. His initial worry had been replaced by surprise and pride. Gloria, you've grown up. You're even more outstanding than I was back then. Lance's expression was a little complicated. He was a little gratified, but also a little distressed. Yes, she has grown up. Just like what we said when she was born, she has grown into a beautiful girl. Deborah gently held Lance's hand and said with a smile. Her eyes were wet with tears. Cyril took a deep breath to calm himself down before releasing the knight's arm. He looked at Gloria with a cold smile, and said, even if you and he are willing to give it to me, only idiots like you would do something like that. Do you think there are idiots like you among all of us here? I'd like to see what you're going to use to fill this bottomless pit. Buffett Banks will provide a fund for the teaching of the homeless children. Mr. Hill slowly made his way out of the crowd. He looked at Luna, and said, Young Mistress Luna, I hope you can give us a proposal and a budget. Initially, She only wanted to donate some food for the children to get through the winter. But now, the promise she received had far exceeded her expectations. It was even enough to give those children a good childhood. Cyril staggered 2 steps back. He barely managed to stay upright because the knight behind him supported him. His face was pale, and his forehead was full of cold sweat. Geoffrey's cold glance just now made him feel as if he had fallen into an ice cave. And what he said was more like a choice between him and Gloria. The president has also chosen to donate money, and he has chosen Miss Gloria. Could it be that Miss Gloria will become the next Miss Hill? That's hard to say, but we have to donate this money. We can only close our eyes and be fools. The guests who were familiar with each other spoke softly, each with their own thoughts. They were trying to determine what changes would happen to the Aden Chamber of Commerce because of this banquet. I'm very touched by Miss Luna's suggestion and what she has done. I'm also very gratified that all of you, as the most outstanding and top businessmen in Chaos City, are willing to donate generously to the children. Michael walked out from the VIP seats, and his powerful voice reverberated throughout the banquet hall. I hope that all of you can understand one thing clearly. In Chaos City, social classes are not fixed. We will promote education for all citizens so that all capable residents can realize their value for the development of Chaos City. As long as the price is reasonable, the clothing store will be able to turn the store's losses around. Meg looked at Gloria with encouragement. Thank you, Mr. Meg. I really don't know how to thank you. Gloria looked at Meg with gratitude. Those children would definitely be very happy if they could wear new clothes. Their smiles would be the best form of thanks, Mag said with a smile. Yes, yes. After this batch of dresses is done, I'll ask them to hurry up and make a batch for the children so they can wear new clothes as soon as possible. Gloria nodded and smiled like a blooming flower. This guy is going to be the biggest obstacle in my path to Miss Gloria. Camilla looked at Meg with a cold gaze. But the steak he makes is super delicious. Black Cat whispered. Yeah. That steak is so delicious. I've never had such a delicious steak before. Camilla's eyes immediately lit up. However, she soon fell into a dilemma. After hesitating for a long while, she sighed and said, "All right, I'll let you off the hook for now." Meg chatted with Gloria for a while. Then, he left Gloria to the noblewomen who were eager to book her. Still not full? Meg walked to the side of the stage. He smiled and patted Amy, who was stuffing an orange into her mouth. "Father, this orange is very sweet. Do you want to try it?" Amy's eyes narrowed with a smile. She raised her hand high and offered a slice of orange to Meg. Meg bent down and opened his mouth to receive it. He bit down and the sweet orange juice and tender orange flesh exploded in his mouth. He nodded and smiled. "Yes, it's very sweet. Thank you, Mr. Meg." The children finally have a chance to go to school. Luna finally finished receiving the last merchant. The book in her hand was already filled with names and donations. She looked at Meg with excitement. "Yes, I didn't think that Mr. Mac's appeal would be so strong. He really is amazing." Vivian, who had been assisting Luna the entire night, also gave Meg a thumbs up. She was also unable to hide the excitement on her face. It's Teacher Luna's teachings that have touched everyone. Clearly, the City Lord and Ms. Vivian are the ones who have the most appeal, Meg said with a smile. "In any case, I'm going to visit Mammoth often to eat grilled fish in the future. Just for your righteous actions," Vivian said with a serious expression. "Still, thank you very much." Luna bowed to Meg with a serious expression. She knew why the tables had suddenly turned. For that, Meg was willing to offend Cyril and Family Morton. "Teacher Luna, what you've done is worthy of everyone's respect." "I only did what I could." Meg hurriedly helped Luna up. Right at this moment, a figure sounded from behind Meg. "Mr. Meg, I am K-Rawls, the Roth Empire's ambassador to Chaos City. May I have a private chat with you?" Meg turned around to discover a tall and broad middle-aged man with brown hair and green eyes. He was wearing a golden robe, and was none other than the ambassador of the Roth Empire, one of the judges of the duel. "Greetings, Ambassador. What can I do for you?" A hint of surprise flashed through Meg's eyes as he tried to calm himself down. This was the first time that he was interacting with an official of the Roth Empire, and this was an official from Josh's faction, so he had to be careful. "This way, please." K-Rawls pointed to the VIP seats before leading the way. Meg hesitated momentarily before quickly following along. Meg's expression quickly returned to normal, and he turned to K-Rawls as he said, "Thank you for giving me this opportunity, Ambassador K-Rawls. However, I'm currently running a restaurant, and I have a child with me, so I still need some time to consider whether I should go to Rodu or not." "All right, then I'll await your good news, Mr. Meg." K-Rawls was a little surprised to hear this, but he didn't press the issue. Instead, he added, "By the way, I'll be returning to Rodu in 15 days to attend the king's birthday banquet. I hope Mr. Meg can give me an accurate reply before then." "All right." Meg nodded before exiting the VIP area. K-Rawls looked at Meg's departing figure and heaved a resigned sigh as he murmured to himself, "That's a great gift. I wonder if Mr. Meg will agree to it. If we weren't in Chaos City, I would have tied him up with a rope and dragged him back to Rodu." After exiting the private room, Meg was quickly surrounded by a group of merchants. After exchanging a few pleasantries, he finally managed to break free from the crowd and return to Amy's side. Following the conclusion of the banquet, the incident of Amy using magic during the banquet was glossed over by Michael without receiving any punishment or warning. Meg followed Amy and Luna out of the Aiden Chamber of Commerce building with the sleeping ugly duckling in his right hand. Luna was holding Amy's little hand and lecturing her with a serious expression. "Amy, you protected teacher today, but you can't use magic in public places in the future. That bad guy is bad, but he's not so bad that he deserves to die right away. The people around him are even more innocent. If they were to be injured or killed by Amy's magic, then Amy would have done something bad. But, he said bad things about father," Amy said in a quiet voice with an aggrieved expression. "I heard that as well. However, no matter what, we can't take someone's life for no good reason. That's the most basic rule." Luna stopped in her tracks and squatted down in front of Amy. She looked at her with a serious expression, and asked, "Can you do that?" Amy, who had snuck up beside Camilla, was holding a corner of the cloak in her hand as she looked at the black cat floating in mid-air with elation on her face. "Meow." The black cat faltered slightly before instantly bristling with rage. It was like a woman who had been stripped naked, and it immediately leaped into Camilla's arms as it looked at Amy with resentment in its eyes. "Meow, meow." Ugly Duckling meowed excitedly in the basket as it grabbed onto the edge of the basket with its front paws as if it were about to jump out. "Remember your promise." Camilla didn't care about Amy as she looked at Meg coldly. She turned around with the black cat in her arms before stopping in her tracks. "I'll be visiting your restaurant tomorrow night. Get ready to receive your guests." After saying that, she walked away without looking back. Suddenly, she transformed into a cloud of black mist before transforming into a huge bat and disappearing into the horizon in the blink of an eye. "It's just a meal. Can you not make it sound so erotic?" Meg facepalmed. As expected, this Countess Bartoli was no ordinary person. "Ugly Duckling, look at it. It can fly, but you have to pant after taking 2 steps. It's because you're too fat that you can't fly. From tomorrow onwards, your appetite will be halved." Chapter 659. Meg rode his bicycle toward the restaurant with furrowed brows as he contemplated his trip to Rodu. This trip was most likely unavoidable, so the most important thing was to increase his safety. He definitely couldn't be recognized as Alex. His opponent was too powerful, and if he were to be recognized, he wouldn't even be able to keep his life, let alone take revenge. Under the bridge in front of the door, a flock of ducks swam past. Amy sat on the back seat and sang the song of counting ducks in her crisp voice. She was waving her arms happily and seemed to be in a very good mood. Ugly Duckling was lying in the basket of the bicycle, rolling from left to right, and then from right to left again. Its eyes were rolled up, and it wore a forlorn expression. "Father, did I sing well?" Amy suddenly interrupted Meg's train of thought. "Huh?" Meg faltered momentarily before suddenly feeling a little apologetic. He smiled and said, "Yes, Amy sang very well. Father wants to hear another song." All right. Then I'll sing The Little Girl Who Picks Mushrooms." Amy nodded happily after being praised. Then, she began to sing, The Little Girl Who Picks Mushrooms, carrying her crisp voice was a little soft and pleasant to the ear. Meg listened quietly, and temporarily cast all of his worries to the back of his mind. Spending time alone with Amy like this always gave him peace of mind very quickly. It was as if he had found a safe harbor. The bicycle stopped outside the restaurant, and Meg carried Amy and Ugly Duckling off the bicycle. He looked around at the pitch-black restaurant, and was a little perplexed as he asked, "Why aren't the lights on? Could it be that Barbara is already asleep? Is big sister Barbara a little piggy? Why is she sleeping so early?" Amy asked with a smile as she carried the dizzy Ugly Duckling in her arms. "Maybe." Meg smiled as he pulled out his keys to open the door. He was just about to open the door when he suddenly discovered a black shadow lying in front of the restaurant. It was a human figure. Fuck. Meg was so scared that he almost threw the door in his hand. In the dark restaurant, a figure with disheveled hair was lying face down at the entrance of the restaurant. One of his hands was pointing in the direction of the door as if to say, "The murderer it's Sister Barbara. What happened to her?" Amy crouched down with Ugly Duckling in her arms, and asked anxiously. Meg reached out and turned on the light. It was Barbara lying at the door. Her left hand was hanging by her side, and her right index finger was stretched out. She seemed to be writing something on the ground. Her face was pale and she was motionless. A murder scene. Meg was also inexplicably panicked when he saw this scene. He quickly bent down and placed his fingers on Barbara's neck artery. Her skin was slightly cold to the touch, but he could still feel a weak pulse. Only then did he heave a sigh of relief. It was good that she wasn't dead. "There's a line of words here," Amy said, pointing at Barbara's hand. Meg moved Barbara's hand slightly to the side, revealing a line of words written in black charcoal ash. "Give me beef kebabs." After turning Barbara's hand over, he discovered that there were traces of charcoal ash left on her index finger. "This girl didn't faint from hunger, did she?" Meg looked at Barbara with a perplexed expression. He had left dinner for Barbara in the incubator before he went out tonight. She seemed to be sleeping, so he wrote a note and stuck it on the kitchen door. Then, "Father, what should we do now?" Amy looked at Meg with curiosity in her eyes. "Let's wake her up first." Meg turned Barbara over before picking her up in his arms. She was 1.55 meters tall and flat-chested, so she was almost weightless in his arms, just like a small child. "System, help me scan her body and find out what's wrong with her body," Meg said to the system in his mind as he stopped in front of the door. "The host doesn't have the authority to conduct a medical diagnosis at the moment. Please ascend to." The system's voice sounded. 500 copper coins per diagnosis. Do you want to do it or not?" Meg interrupted the system. "Do it." The system's reply wasn't pretentious in the slightest. Ding. Examination complete. 500 copper coins have been deducted. The examination report has been generated. Please check it. The system's voice soon sounded again. Mag placed Barbara on a table at the side, and began to carefully read through the test report in his mind. Barbara, 15 years old, gender, female, strength, 7th tier spatial magician. Diagnosis: severe hypoglycemia, severe anemia, severe flat-chested. All other indicators normal. System: what the hell is this severe flat-chested illness of yours? Meg almost thought that his eyes were playing tricks on him, and couldn't help but complain. According to modern medical principles, severe flat-chested illness is also a female illness. If it can't be effectively improved, it may cause a great impact on a female's physiology and psychology, the system said righteously. You're good at bullshitting. Meg rolled his eyes, and couldn't be bothered to continue arguing with the system. Severe hypoglycemia and severe anemia, it really wasn't easy for a princess to develop such an illness. However, since the diagnosis had been completed, Meg had an idea in his heart. At least it wasn't some heart disease, cancer, or any other incurable illness. She should be fine after drinking some sugar water and replenishing her blood. Meg went into the kitchen to pour a cup of Spring of Life and added 2 spoonfuls of sugar. He then helped Barbara up and slowly fed her. After a while, Barbara's pale face visibly improved, and some color returned to her face. Her originally weak breathing also gradually quickened, and her body regained some temperature, and was no longer cold. Where am I? Barbara slowly opened her eyes, and spoke in a weak voice. Then, her gaze fell on Meg's face, and she was momentarily stunned when she saw his face so close to hers. Barbara suddenly felt that her body had regained its senses, and then she felt a pair of warm hands on her back. Her eyes widened, and her face reddened, and she stood up from the table with a whoosh. However, her body, which had just recovered a bit of strength, swayed, and she lost her balance and fell into Meg's arms. Her hands subconsciously wrapped around Meg's neck, and her face was almost pressed against his. I said, I'm just saving you out of humanitarianism. You don't have to throw yourself into my arms like this, do you? Meg was still holding the cup in his hand, and his arms were spread open as he looked at Barbara, who had her arms around his neck, and was almost pressing her face against his. He really couldn't arouse the slightest interest in this kind of child who hadn't even started puberty. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.